Would everyone please rise so we can salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Isn't that a beautiful thing we can say? As is our tradition and procedure before the legislative meeting, we like to recognize students and employees of the Pittsburgh Public School District. I'd like to ask board members to please come forward, and I will turn this portion of the meeting over to Mrs. Ebony Pugh.
Thank you, Ms. Hazuda. We have a very special Distinguished Achievement Award to present this evening. We would like to bring up board member Mark Brentley Sr., as well as the partner organizations of the Take a Father to School Day initiative, the Pittsburgh chapter of Mad Dads, A+ Schools, A+ Men, Coalition for Fathers and Families, Allegheny Family Network, and the Pittsburgh Public Schools Early Childhood Education Program's Male Fatherhood Involvement Initiative. Now in its 14th year, Take a Father to School Day is one of the district's most successful parent engagement initiatives. So successful that this year the initiative was named a 2012 American School Board Journal Magna Award Grand Prize winner for Category 3, the districts with over 20,000 student enrollment. Magna Awards, a supplement to American School Board Journal and published by the National School Boards Association, recognizes highly innovative initiatives that provide excellent examples of school district leadership. Take a Father to School Day encourages men to get involved in their children's schools. This year, on Friday, May 18th, the district will once again welcome all fathers, grandfathers, uncles, and other adult males who impact the life of a Pittsburgh public school student to spend the day with that student, participating in various activities planned at each school. In recent years, Mr. Brentley has expanded the program to incorporate civic service through the day's theme, Yes, I Can. All of our Take a Father to School Day dads are encouraged to bring used eyeglasses and non-perishable food items to be donated to those in need. Participation in the annual day continues to grow. The number of documented males participants has grown from 3,669 in 2007 to 5,964 in 2011, proving, as described by the Magna Awards, that the program dispels the myth that men do not want to be actively involved in their children's education. Congratulations to Pittsburgh Public School Board member Mark Brentley Sr. and the partner organizations on the success of the Take a Father to School Day initiative. This concludes our Distinguished Achievement Awards. I'll take a photo.
Thank you, Mrs. Pugh. There is cake and refreshments in the hall for those who would like to go out and celebrate with them. Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Bentley? Mr. Bentley is present. Mrs. Khaleesi?
Here.
Mrs. Fink?
Here.
Dr. Holly?
Here.
Mr. Eisler?
Present.
Mr. McCray?
Here.
Ms. Shealy?
Here.
Mr. Sumter?
Present.
Mrs. Azuda?
Here.
All members present.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Sumter to please share our core beliefs and commitments.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Azuda. The Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to educating every student to their highest level of academic achievement. We're committed to providing a safe and orderly work environment for all students, staff, employees. We are committed to supporting all activities in an effective and efficient manner for the support of students. We are committed to distributing resources in an efficient and equitable manner to meet the needs of all students to the maximum extent feasible. And last but not least, we are committed to improving and increasing community, family, parent engagement within the Pittsburgh Public Schools, of which you've just seen an excellent example of that. All of these together, we feel, will improve the governance of the Pittsburgh Board of Education, which will translate in a higher achievement for all the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter.
I just wanted to add a few more to the presentation. There were names I wanted to mention, if
Okay,
it's
go
okay. For the record, wanted to mention some of the other members who were not here, but I wanted to identify the ones that were here. Of course, Mark Rodicus, Keith Blockton, Henry Struthers, Keno Fitzpatrick, Brandon Phillips, Larry Davis, Melvin L., Leonard Carter, James Saunders, and Larry Johnson, Tim Goetz, and Richard Wilson. Dr. Lane, I also wanted to, if it's okay, just to finish this part out since we did the presentation. There were awards given to each district of the grand prize, and I just wanted to give you this for the district, which is the Magna Award plaque that was given to each of the grand prize winner. Can I pass that down, please? And then also, the most important thing, the check. Each grand prize winner wins $4,000, and so pass it on for the program. So,
I don't know if it's going to make it
so
down
I'm going to pass it down there, and I hope you still have the 4,000 in there. Maybe get down there to some thousands. And
Thank you so much. This
yes.
is beautiful. We'll find a suitable place to mount this, Mr. Brentley. And I believe the money is for a student scholarship. So I believe that's the case.
I was under the impression it was for that particular program. I'm hoping it
Okay.
is.
Well, we'll clarify that. And we'll
hoping.
certainly spend it appropriately, I'm sure.
And then the final thing I wanted to mention under that as well, or I can hold this until the resolution, whatever. This is the Take a Father to School Day. We developed a checklist that we're suggesting or encouraging to fathers this year. And because we have so many fathers that are coming out and attending, this year we're asking the fathers to do a couple of things. Number one, make sure that you sign in. Number two, you greet the principals. Number three, acknowledge the staff. Number four, proper attire, no headgear. Proper language, no profanity, no yelling. Be an active participant in the day's event. Report disruptive actions and behaviors. Sign up for an activity and enroll to the role with the role model for the schools. And that is sign up for the PTOs, PTAs, PSCC, or volunteer. There will be a positive male role model for your child in the classroom and their friends. So we wanted to share that this year, which is a little different, and we're also asking this year that fathers would sign up in their schools to be what we're referring to them as fathers greeters for that day, and that is signing up with the principals, helping out because we're so short of staff, and just kind of helping the guys to get through the building, making yourself available to the staff. So we wanted to share that and make sure. I do have one other announcement that I'll say for the end of the new business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Will everyone please turn to the minutes from last month? Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions? Eisler Khalazi, motion to approve the March 21st, 2012 minutes from the legislative meeting. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. This time I'd like to read the executive session statement. In addition to executive sessions announced at the legislative meeting of March 21st, 2012, the board met in executive sessions on April 18, 2012, and immediately before this legislative meeting to discuss various personnel matters that may include, but are not limited to, administrative vacancies and positions opened and closed. Finally, at the executive session immediately before this legislative meeting, the board discussed the student discipline cases that involved violations of various portions of the Code of Student Conduct. The board does not vote at executive session. We'll begin this evening with the committee report on education that's before you, submitted by Mrs. Shireen Shealy and her committee. If you would please turn to page 8 of the report, I'd like to give you the student suspension, transfer, and expulsion numbers for the month. 62 students were suspended for 4 to 10 days. No students suspended for 4 to 10 days and transferred to another Pittsburgh public school. 3 students expelled out of school for 11 days or more. No students were expelled out of school for 11 days or more and transferred to another Pittsburgh public school. This evening, we will begin following our new procedure that was introduced at last Wednesday's agenda review session. Before voting on the education and business reports, board members will be discussing each of the items that were pulled at agenda review and any additional agenda items that are requested to be pulled for discussion this evening. Our discussion will be centered on one issue at a time. My hope is that we will have improved communication on the major issues before us. After discussion is complete, board members will take a roll call vote on the entire report. Now, agenda items that were pulled at agenda review were number 8 and number 22. Are there any additional items that anyone would like pulled for discussion? Okay. Then we'll begin our discussion with agenda item number 8, advanced placement exams. If you want to turn to it, and anyone have any thoughts, questions, whatever. It's under consultants and contracted services payments authorized. Number 8, any concerns? Dr. Hawley.
The concern that I have is that we wanted to know if the district could pay for the IB exams that are given at Barack Obama International Studies.
We have not worked out a way to do that. We're working, as we said at agenda review, with Dr. Walters around this, but at this point, he has not designated a portion of his budget to support this, but we'll continue to see if there's a way that we can at least support a portion of these costs.
Are all of the AP exams coming from the school, from the particular schools themselves? They're paying for those exams?
I believe that's correct. They're paying for them out of site-based budget.
I would hope that we would look for some way of supplementing some of the costs for the IB exams, since they are really, really expensive. And we do have a lot of students that take advantage at that process. Thank you.
Mr. Eisler.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. I want to second that from Dr. Hawley. I think in a way, if we can, Dr. Lane, at least take a look at the needs-based students. Those students, they are rather expensive, and there is more than one exam like the AP exams. And I think if we can take a look, and not this year, I mean, I know how tight money is, it would be good to see if we could get that implemented. I know that over a period of time, most of the schools have worked on the AP exam funding, and I think it'd be good if we can try to work with Dr. Walters some way to see what we can do, and if not for all students, and especially based on need, I think it's really critical. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. Ms. Shealy.
Thank you, and I guess I would like to put a third to that idea of helping to support those students. My question is, I know that AP allows for needs-based funding from the organization that provides the AP exam. Does the IB exam do that?
I don't believe they do, Ms. Shealy. That's somebody, no, they do not.
So again, just to reiterate the comments of Dr. Hawley and Mr. Eisler, it would be really nice to find a way, particularly for people with demonstrated need, to help fund the cost of these exams. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I want to raise questions about number 22.
Wait a minute, we're on number 8. We're just on number 8 now,
Okay,
the
well,
advanced placement. We'll get to number 22. I'll put you first on the list for 22. We're still on number 8. Are there any further comments from anyone on number 8? All right, then we will move on to number 22. And it's the Section 200 board policies. And Mr. Brentley, go ahead, you can go first. Thank you.
yeah, I want to raise some questions, procedural questions. This is a policy I shared, gender review. This is a policy. One board member brings it forward, gets a committee to get behind him, and here we are making huge changes to a policy with language. I believe it's very dangerous. I will not be supporting it, but I'm sharing this information for the public because the public should be very, very concerned anytime a board member can take a bulk of policies, change language, change its meaning after all the rich history that was put into it, and then present it as one large piece for a vote. That's not democracy. That's not how it works. And regardless of who has been appointed to address this issue, it is still misleading to the public. I want to remind this board as well as the public, last year, same committee, same board member made recommendations which later made it on the national scene in terms of a district lowering its standards for students to participate within the school district. It's something that we shouldn't do. I will not be supporting it. And once again, if this is going to operate this way, then what's the need for an entire board? What's the need for the public? And by the way, did the public have access to these changes? Yes, the first thing we say, it's on the internet, but we know the majority of folks don't have access to the internet. And so it makes it very, very difficult to try to be honest and open when you're trying to do things on this board. I do not support it. I would encourage my colleagues to be very, very careful. And once again, to the public, I would encourage you to try to get it and to read it. I know it's going to impact certain students negatively because of the way it's always thrown together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. You have raised your concerns on this before, and it has been addressed. There are 3 members representing the board on this committee, as well as 2 lawyers, as well as the appropriate staff members, depending on the subject. The committee comes up with the recommendations, working very much with our law department. And then we had 2 full, long nights of discussing and reviewing and the opportunity to change these policies. So these are coming before us tonight. And I appreciate your offering your opinion, but there is a very long process that's been going through. And yes, the answer is they are on the internet, both the original and the revisions. So thank you. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. The primary responsibility of school directors are to set policy. The policy manual that we have in this district looks like the yellow pages in terms of size, in terms of number of policies, et cetera. It would behoove board members to at least read through all of the policies to know what they are at present. It also would be advantageous for the board itself to update as necessary its policies, to overhaul the policies, update them because laws change, circumstances change, and new items become worthy of policy attention. In sitting on this committee, I can say that no one board member has recommended or caused policies to be changed. This is a collaborative effort with the relevant staff sitting in. The major updates are coming from the legal staff, and it's a team of individuals. It's a collaborative effort. It would be possible, but not prudent or effective, to have the whole board sit in and go over the policy manual. Therefore, we have subcommittees. We have subcommittees for education, business, communications and marketing, and also for policy review. Working in that context, at least 3 board members have the opportunity to monitor and watch what's going on, such that if other board members wanted to report or other board members would want to sit in on that meeting, they could. That recommendation of the changes comes forth to the entire board for presentation at public meetings. The public's invited to attend. In no way is it trying to do anything that would undermine or adversely affect students. It would be wise for boards to have current policies, policies that are aligned to current laws, policies that are aligned to address current issues of concern within the school district. So it's, some organizations have it scheduled on a routine basis to update their policies every 3 years, to look at them, to examine them. It's been a rather long length of time since these policies had been addressed in total. But if one could appreciate the monumental effort, especially from the law offices of Mr. Ira Weiss and his staff, the amount of time and effort that it takes to read through mountains of information and to amend where necessary, to add on where necessary, to update where necessary, to correct, and also to bring in consistency. And as we know, as time goes on, certain policies have changed. Some of the policies of the past, you might wonder why they're still in there, and it takes the board to give attention to this so that the public understands that this is a necessary effort of the board. It's a collaborative effort of board members, staff, and legal staff together, collectively doing a monumental task in performing the work. And as some board members have commented at those public meetings, that a lot of work was involved in doing it, and we're going through it section by section. One recommendation that we have that's different from the past is the policies that we have are policies and procedures written as one document, so that if you change the procedure, you would have to change the policy. You'd have to come back with another vote. If that happens, that would bog down the operations of this board, so that what you have now is policies all in one place, and procedures are separated out and titled as administrative regulations, such that the staff could change the administrative regulations and not necessarily have to bring it back to the board for a vote, because you're not changing the policy. There may be a practice or a designation or carrying out that policy that might need changing, so that that could happen without necessarily having a board vote. That's, in a big nutshell, kind of what this committee has been doing. And we're only on the 100, 200s. We've looked at the 1,000s, but there's still a bunch of policies to go. So this effort still is going to be ongoing. This effort started last year. I don't even know how long ago. It's been so long since we've been doing this, but we've been meeting, we've been working, we've been thanking the legal staff for they're the ones that are doing most of the writing and the editing and making sure they get the copies out, distributing to individuals, making it a little easier, but it's still a lot of work and it takes time. And then when you have a bunch of folks around the table, at least you can get the perspective from the staff, how it's carried out, why it's there, what's going on. You get the perspective from board members, and you get the opinion of legal counsel on what's going on, such that it's a very thorough manner of updating, overhauling, and amending our policies as needed. So just so the public, all those out in television land, all those within the sound of my voice get a clear understanding of what's going on in those meetings. And I would suggest, if need be, come to one of our committee meetings when we're going over the policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Dr. Hawley.
Just to add very briefly, the policy committee did come to us as we came together as a board to look over the recommendations of the 3 board members and the staff that actually, and the attorneys that actually wrote the new policies or augmented the policies. 2 of the major issues that I don't have an issue with the changing of the policies when they were done. I think that it was very important that some of them be changed. We definitely needed to update some of the policies so that they reflect the needs of what we need to do for our students. And one of those policies, just to give an example, is the change of the grade entrance the age entrance from 8 to 6. And I think that is very significant as an educator that we were allowed to change that. And we wouldn't have been able to do that if it had not been for the law department and the persons that actually worked on that particular policy. And also, we're in a technology age. So we had to really look at the technology area that we have in our policies and make some significant changes there so that they reflect the technology that the children are actually using in the 21st century. So I understand the need for changing of some of these policies. Somebody had to sit down and actually do the grunt work, is what I call it, that front-end work. But we all had the opportunity to come in, listen, make comments, and make revisions ourselves if necessary. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Ms. Shealy.
Thank you. I actually just had a couple of questions when I pulled this. Well, they came up in the conversation. If a person doesn't have internet access, how do they get the policies?
It is my understanding, and Dr. Lane, please correct me, that there will be a policy manual in every school building available to every parent and every staff if anybody does not have it. It is quite a large document. Therefore, each school will have at least one hard copy of this and then access online, totally access online. And the public libraries also will have this. So we will distribute this in public places for people to come to get it.
Are you planning to distribute it as they are approved? Like, for example, this is the 200 series, the 100 series was approved, and there are hundreds of many more series to come. So I guess what I would suggest is not wait until the full manual is updated, but as soon as possible, allow that public access.
It's a good suggestion because, as Mr. Sumter said, this is probably going to be another year to 18 months before the entire document is completed. I think that Dr. Hawley pointed out very well that the front-end work that the staff has to do on this and then the legal work that has to be done takes an inordinate amount of time.
So I guess the second question is, for those with internet access, how long does it take to get these documents uploaded and available for public purview?
Almost minutes after we finish, Mr. Campbell is putting them online.
So if I go home tonight out and get on the internet, I should...
Aren't they on there already?
Mr. Campbell, where are you when we need you?
They're on
Dr.
there
Well,
Lane?
already.
Mr. Campbell is not here this evening, but they are online at this point. I think they were online as draft, but we will get, once the board, if the board would approve the 200 series tonight, we will get them on, I would say, within 24 hours.
Thank you, Dr. Lane. And my last comment, I think, is to thank Mr. Eisler, Mr. Sumter, and Mrs. Fink for their representation on the policy committee, and the solicitor's office and the staff who have gone and done a lot of work to save some others of us from doing a lot of work. And so I appreciate the effort, and I appreciate the amount of access you've given the board to these policies through the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Shealy. Mr. Eisler.
Thank you, Mrs. Zuda. I want to pick up on something that Dr. Hawley said towards the end of her comments, and it has to do with the technology and the issues we're dealing with in technologies, because the bulk of what is before us tonight are the 200s, which are for students. However, there is another one in Operations 913, which is network usage and safety. And this really is one that was, to give you an example, was adopted in 2005, and since that time, there's been a number of federal laws and state laws and regulations that have been written that we have to implement. You know, we are not a legislative body where we make law. We really apply the law, which is what we're sworn in to do when we're sworn in as school board members. So this takes into the Children's Internet Protection Act as well as the Neighborhood Children's Internet Protection Act, and is guaranteed that all the children and families' rights are guaranteed under the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, or the one that is known as FERPA, which we hear every time we come together as a policy committee. So this is a very important policy because it gets us at least up to date with what we are expected to do by federal and state law in terms of protecting our children, our staff, and our district when it comes to the internet. So that is the one other policy that is in here tonight. One of the things that is happening is that as these come up and we have to make changes on certain policies, we try to bring them all to the board at one time. So that is another one I think that parents should really look at because it's very important. And Dr. Hawley and I should go into the history of public education and why it was 8. No good reason, but it is a good point, especially with what we know about brain development in children today, that children should be in school by 6. So thank you, Mrs. Suzuda, and thank you to the board members.
Mr. McCray. Thank you, Mr. Eisler.
I also just want to echo the thanks to the committee. I think it's a great job. I think that you're going to love this one. This should be an ongoing thing. I think we should do this on a regular basis. I'm not part of the committee, so I can say that. But some places do it every 3 to 5 years. And I think, you know, this is our 100th anniversary, and we were asked, in 100 years, what do you think is one of the accomplishments? This is a great accomplishment of this board. And the fact, if we get consistently do it on a regular basis, that's another great accomplishment. So I think looking forward and looking backward, we can say we did this.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I want to just remind this board that regardless of how much we can pat ourselves on passing these policies, the fact of the matter is that it's clear that majority of the students and parents do not have access to the internet. It's clear that if they're actually trying to get this information, and if you're saying all of a sudden it's going to be available, one hard copy at each school, well, it's a moot point by the time it gets there because it's policy. And the purpose of setting a policy is to set the policy, allow a period for public comment. And if you set the policy, there is no period for the public to get access to it, to make their comments to their elected officials, and then or come to the public hearing and share it, then we're stroking ourselves on the back and we're bypassing the entire public access part. So we can talk about things and we can sound great and all that good stuff, but the fact of the matter is a huge change in policies and language and wording has been changed, and the majority of the public don't even know it's going to be changed. Some of this may even take shape come the beginning of the school for some of these parents. That's not the way you do it. It's just it's another way of insulting the parents that we don't want your involvement. We should bend over backwards to get their input. Dr. Lane, last year, there was a policy made by this same committee to lower the standards for our students to participate in extracurricular activity from a 2.0, from a 2.0 to a 1.0. It was supposed to end, I believe it was only for a year. What is your opinion of where it is and where does it stand now? If someone had to ask you, what would be the...
Mr. Bruntley, could we hold that question for later, because that's not part of the agenda?
Well,
Could
it's
we
part
hold
of
it
this...
under new business?
No, that's part of this question here. It's still...
No, that's not going to be voted on tonight. That's already done.
But it is part of the policies and part of the committee.
It's not part of the report that we're voting on tonight. So if you could hold it, we could talk about it
No,
under new business.
I'd like to because it is related. I'd like to...
It's not. So could you, I appreciate it, and I'll put a note, and we'll get back to it.
Mr. Zuda, listen, this new thing that we're trying to change here is another way of silencing certain comments. First of all, let me also say for the record, Mr. Weiss, this board, this legislative body moved forward with a major change in how we operate and deliver information and how we deal with the board, deal with information here on the board, and it was never a vote taken. So I want that to be noted for this record.
So noted at agenda review.
Ms. Hazuda, I'd like to finish my comment to the superintendent.
I would like you to stick to tonight's agenda. I'm not saying don't say what you're doing.
Listen,
ask it under.
It is not. It's related to the policies. It's related to.
But it is not what we're voting on this evening.
But it is related. And why is it that I always have to defend when I need to make comments? You've never shared. I'm talking, please. I'm talking, and I have the floor. Why is it that I always have to defend myself? Why?
Because
no one ever has to go through this. I'll say it again, I am an elected official. I have the right to speak. I have the right to raise comments. It is related, okay? And I'd like to finish my comment to the superintendent.
Absolutely, and I would appreciate it if you would bring it up later in the meeting.
Mr. Zuda, listen, please. Please,
It would be very
this is the
appropriate later.
third attempt to try to silence and to stop. Sir, I am not a robot.
No, I am
And
not trying to silence you. I am trying to ask you to follow something that we all agreed to do.
I'm going to ask the superintendent my question, if I could, please.
Mr. Brentley, I will allow
you
you to ask it this evening, but I would appreciate it on further going meetings. Write yourself a note, bring it up. It's not that I don't want you to talk. I'm trying to keep our conversation relative to what's in agenda review. Going back to previous items does not serve our purposes.
You are attempting to control the conversation.
Absolutely,
and to control what
so that it is more productive.
Authority.
I am trying to control it so that it's more productive based on what we will be voting on tonight.
I have a right.
Not based on what went on a year ago,
Don't
5
matter.
years
It's
ago,
related.
10 years
It's the same
ago.
committee. It's the same similar policy.
I would
the
be
same
very
method
happy
that
to
was
have
used.
you entertain it later. That would be very, very appropriate, and we'll get your answer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Do you have any other things on the policies that we will be voting on this evening?
No, I don't at this time.
Does anyone else? Anyone? Okay, thank you. Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call vote, please?
I have something else to say. I want to make comments on number 21.
We didn't pull it, so you can bring it up later if you want. Mr. Weiss, can we have
Wait a minute.
I asked at the beginning of the meeting, was there anything anyone else wanted to pull to discuss? I
Ms.
looked
Suzuda,
directly at you. You said nothing.
Mr. Weiss, this item is before me. I am an elected official. I have the right to raise questions on what is put before me. Are you telling me I cannot
Mr. Weiss, please don't answer that. I will answer it.
I'm asking the solicitor.
Tonight, since it's the first time we're doing this process.
You are not going to just do a favor for me, Mr. Zuda.
I will.
Mr. Weiss,
I will, because we're trying out this process.
I am going to ask you the question, Mr. Weiss. If the items are before us, do I have a right to ask a question on it?
Mr. Brentley, the president indicated at the beginning of the meeting, if any board member had any item that he or she wished to discuss, they should note it. Everyone had an opportunity to do that. There were 2 items that she mentioned. No one else brought anything up. So I think everyone had an opportunity to state which items they wish to discuss. So I don't see any problem or any limitation of debate. is all one had to do was say, I'd like to discuss item X, and it would have been discussed.
Yeah, but Mr. Weiss, this is a new system that was thrown together. This is this new consent agenda. Nobody knows what we're
It
doing.
is not a consent agenda.
It is.
Well, I'm not going to argue
Well,
with you, it's not.
Mr. Weiss, they're simply not using the word. I'm sure there's some other issues there. But you, Ms. Suzuta, you do not change. Do you know how dangerous that is in stopping an elected official from representing his constituents? This item is before us. This is in the Education Committee. We're on the education portion of this meeting.
And I appreciate what you're saying, and since this is the first time we're doing this to work out the kinks, I take back my stance, and please, go ahead, bring up. But I would appreciate it next month, that when I ask for what items to be pulled, that you mention it.
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
You're welcome, go ahead.
Unbelievable.
Go ahead. What questions do you have on number 21, or comments or statements?
The comment is on number 21. This is the changing of the calendar. Dr. Lane, there were some concerns shared with you around the changing of the times. Have you reconsidered that at all on the start time for some of the high schools?
Mr. Brentley, the start times are not on the item you're voting on this evening. This is just the actual days of the school year.
Okay.
But back to your question regarding start times, Mr. Vassar and I have talked to a number of certainly community people and others that have expressed various concerns. We're going to do the very best we can. That's all I can say. We have not come up with a better solution yet, but we'll continue to work on it to the very best we can to address some of the concerns we're hearing. But as I said, I can't promise that we found a better way because we haven't found it yet.
So the number 21 does not address the start times?
Number 21 is the calendar itself. That's the actual days of school.
Okay, but in there, it does list the early start times.
No, it's just the days of school.
Okay, where is that then in the booklet, in the early start times?
It's not in the book.
Okay, when are we going, I mean, you will be presenting something to us?
We already did present something to us. If there are any changes, we'll certainly make sure you're aware of those.
Okay, presented, I mean, in terms of something for us to vote on?
No, we don't vote on the actual start times for various schools, or the board has not been asked to vote on that.
Okay, but we changed the times this year, though, Doctor.
We change them every year, Mr. Brentley. There are always some adjustments.
But this one is huge in terms of...
It's certainly more significant. That's why we did the presentation.
Okay. You know, Doctor, I just want to tell you, I totally disagree. When you make the kind of recommendations that you've made, and there's not even opportunity to vote on it. We're starting high school. Some of these high schools will be starting at 7:11 in the morning. We're asking kids to get up and to actually get into town at 5:30 to make their exchanges. We're also recommending some of these kids will not receive their bus passes, or there's going to be a change along with the Port Authority changes. There should be something that we should be voting on. And, well, I totally disagree, Doctor. I am, you know, it is almost as if everybody's kind of doing their own thing here. When will the parents actually find out, or how will they be able to communicate it to their board members if they're not supportive of it? If they're not supportive, or their concerns about these early starts? Is there an opportunity, or have you shared that with them on the start date yet?
I believe parents are aware, and I'd say that based on the fact that I've heard from parents. For example, I think both Dr. Holly and I, Mr. Sumter, were at the Hill District Education Council meeting. Parents came to talk about it at that meeting. The Excellence for All parent group, of course, we've presented to them about this. They are the ones that take the information back to their schools. Principals have shared it with parents at their schools, because I don't believe that, from the information I have back and the kind of feedback I've gotten on it, parents are aware.
Unbelievable. Okay, Doc.
Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. This is again in relation to item 22, Section 200 Board Policies on Pupils. It's my understanding that nothing has changed in any procedure of developing policies as was done in the past even before the internet came into existence, which now dates back to probably the mid-50s. So it's been out for some time. If anything, the addition of electronic digital information has been added to this, such that those who prefer not to seek out the paper copy can access it anywhere they can get access to the internet, which there's a number of Wi-Fi locations, people in their own homes, folks with smartphones, with iPads, with tablets, portable computers, libraries, can have access, electronic access to the document. So I just wanted to say that that has not changed. So that those folks who have not availed themselves of the opportunities that digital electronic information provides still have the same means that they had before of accessing, being aware of the policy. I know at one time folks only listened to the radio because television wasn't available. There have been improvements in technology. There's been added devices to share and use information, and because we are in an information age at present, information travels a lot faster, a lot more flexibility. We availed ourselves to that also. And the only other comment that which is a personal comment, life is a learning process, and folks should never, ever stop learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call vote, please, on the Committee on Education?
Brentley?
I'll be voting no on the entire report.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Report's approved 8-1.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. We'll now move on to the committee report on business and finance, submitted by Mrs. Khaleesi, Business Chair, and Mr. McCray, Finance Chair, in their committee. There were no agenda items pulled from the business and finance report at last Wednesday's agenda review meeting. Are there any items that need pulled now for further discussion at this time? Mrs. Shealy.
I would like to pull items C2A, C2B, and C3.
Any other items? C2, go ahead.
C2A, C2B, C3.
Are there any other items that anyone would like to pull for discussion? Mr. Bruntley, which ones do you want to discuss?
I have some that she has as well. I'm going to share some other ones.
Now's the time to share them.
Well, I'm going to speak on those three that she pulled as well.
Okay, any others?
Possibly, yes.
Could you tell them to me? So we'll
I'm not sure
do.
at this point. I'll wait and see how the discussion goes. But it's before me, and I may raise some questions at that time.
They won't,
You can't talk and pull something away that's before me for her.
that's why I would like you to tell us now so that we can all discuss it.
I'll determine that after listening to the discussion.
Okay, we'll talk first C2A, if anyone has any comments. Ms. Shealy?
And this goes for both C2A and C2B. If I recall correctly, when we did the resolution to put a block of schools on sale in the fall, we had an end date to the RFP. Why is there no end date in C2A or C2B?
There's an end date in the RFP. I don't have it with me, but there's a deadline for the bids.
Our resolution had deadlines, though.
It's not in here, but it's an end date in the RFPs. I don't have them with me.
So what's the implication of that not being in our resolution?
I mean, the resolution authorizes the solicitation of bids for the sale. That's really all the board need do. The detail of it, that is the end date and those sorts of things, need not be in the resolution. I mean, it was in the resolution the last time, I think, because of the number of schools and the fact that there were different dates for the groups of them. But I don't have the dates, Ms. Shealy.
So I guess without, I hear you saying that they're in the RFP, but it just is confusing to me because without having an end date, if you get a single bid, you know, how do you get another one? I mean, you could take the single bid versus having a specified period.
Well, there's a deadline by which bids must be submitted, and that is in the RFP, and it will be in the advertisement, assuming the board approves 2A and 2B. And then when the bids are in, then they'll be reviewed.
Excuse me, Ms. Shealy, the end date for the Overbrook bid is June 13th, and the end date for the Shenley bid is June 29th. Ronald Joseph.
Thank you, Mr.
Budget
Joseph.
Development.
Why are those two dates different? Why are they both June 29th, for example?
Well, the Shenley bid allows for a couple extra, 2 extra weeks because we identified that the Shenley process should have some community involvement, and also that before it's somewhat of a highly volatile issue.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph, that helps. But I'm not sure that this is appropriate, and I'm not sure whose district Overbrook is in. So I thought it was Mrs. Fink. To allow that public process for Shenley is one thing, but wouldn't that process also be necessary for the people who live around Overbrook?
I don't know which public process, but if you mean the community to come and the community would like to see something done with the building, but the building doesn't have any real direct neighbors. It sits off of Route 51. It's on a major highway. There's a very large field next to it. There's really no adjacent neighbors or residences at all.
Thank you, Mrs. Fink. Did you want to say something? You good? Thank you. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Shealy. Mr. Eisler.
To Mr. Joseph, I would assume I want to direct this. When it comes to the Shenley property that Mrs. Shealy was talking about, has the community been notified about this RFP?
Mr. P. Camerdo attended a Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation tour on Friday, April 13th, and at that tour they were notified that there is interest in the building, and we would be asking the board to authorize the advertisement and receipt of sealed bids for the sale of the building.
Thank you. And however, was the community notified about that meeting, and were there community members there? I mean, Mr. Sumter and I both attended a community meeting probably about 2 months ago, and there was real interest in just informing the community about if the building was going up, what were the particulars. And I know that there's been a lot of discussion at this board every time somebody bids as to have they informed and work with the community in terms of their potential reuse of the building. So I know that that's a little bit early, but I'm just wondering how deep that went.
Well, there were community members present, and there also was media coverage of the tour as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Suzuda.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. Dr. Hawley.
For 2B, I had asked before, let me preface this by saying that I'm very disappointed that the board even years ago closed Shenley. Shenley was a vital part of the Hill District community. So I'm really not in support of this, of selling this building at all. However, you've already decided to close the building and move the students around. But there is a section of that building that can still be used by the children that live in that community, and that is the recreational facilities there. Instead of having these children travel all the way to the East End for their physical activities, they could be utilizing that section of the building for their health-related activities or PE activities. So I'm really opposed to the sale of this building, but I'm especially opposed to us not being able to use those, the pool, the gym facilities that we've spent a lot of money on, and now we're basically giving it away to somebody else. So I will not be supporting 2B.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Ms. Shealy.
To the public participation, will there be a public, or are there plans for a public meeting in conjunction with this sale under 2B?
I mean, we certainly can have that kind of meeting. I will note that the member of council that represents that district was present at the walkthrough that Mr. Joseph referenced. We certainly can have such a meeting. Typically, when there's a bidder, the bidder then shares his or their plans for it. I mean, there's been a lot of interest expressed in this property from around the country. And any of these, have been responded to the same way. We're going to solicit bids. Ms. Willig just handed me the dates that you were given. So if the board wishes to have a separate meeting before these bids are solicited, we could certainly do that. But we're giving this some additional time than we did the last time, because one of the some of the feedback that the district received was that it was an abbreviated or the schedule where the time for submitting a bid was too short. So we've made it a little longer, and we think there's been adequate opportunity to see it and be aware of it. I'll certainly work with Mr. Camarda and Mr. Joseph to arrange a meeting if that's the desire of the board, but I honestly believe that this is a well-known fact. This building is up for sale and we're getting bids from both the community around the school and the larger real estate community that has expressed interest in it.
You done? Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. I somewhat have a similar concern regarding the recreation facilities at Shenley. And if at all possible, if it could be just cordoned off and separated and not a part of the sale, or if the future developer would allow access to that, that would be desirable. The other question is, in other RFPs, we had language to the extent of the prospective purchaser, or if it was purchased, had to provide meetings to go over benefits to the community or to discuss impacts on the community. Is similar language going to be in future documents?
This RFP is virtually identical to the last one.
Okay.
So there will be a price bid and there will be other information that will enable the district to analyze the most advantageous bids, such as tax revenue and things like that. So yes, this RFP will be virtually identical to the last one.
So it's basically my understanding that even when the bids arrive, this board still will have the opportunity to either accept or reject any bid.
Question, these buildings aren't sold without the board vote.
Okay.
We bring, the staff will bring forward the recommendation, and then the board has to vote. You're absolutely correct.
Okay, so if they're not, which the last bid was not, well, it wasn't even satisfactory to the administration, much less didn't even get to a board vote of
That's correct.
rejecting it, such that, again, if it doesn't look right, we still have actions we could take. Thank you.
It is the board's decision.
Thank you. Mr. Brentley?
Yes, first, with the addition to the dates on 2A and 2B, we need to vote to accept that amendment, which is the cutoff dates, because we vote, well, that's what I'm suggesting. Now that we have the cutoff dates, and it is not included, because we only vote on what is before us. And now that we know that there are some cutoff dates, which should have been included in here, we need to add those items in to include those, because if they're on the RFP, it should also reflect what's before us and also the minutes of this meeting. So, I mean, if necessary, I can put a motion on the floor to amend for 2A. The cutoff date would be, I thought Mr. Joseph said June 13th, am I correct?
Yes, Mr. Brentley.
And then for 2B, you said the cutoff date is June 29th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Well, then that's a motion first so that we can
Okay, would you word it in as a motion, please?
make a motion that we amend items C, 2A, and 2B to reflect what was shared in terms of a cutoff date for the proposals.
Second.
Okay, Brentley and Shealy? All those in favor?
We have
What?
discussion on the
Okay,
motion.
sure. Go ahead.
Just to be clear, Mr. Weiss, was that specific enough of a motion?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion?
With all due respect, I left for a second. Can somebody tell me what the motion exactly refers to?
The motion for 2A, the motion adds that the cutoff date or the deadline for bid submission is June 13th, 2012. And for 2B, the deadline for bid submission is June 29th, 2012.
And originally it was for June 13th for 2A, and for 2B it was?
It never, that's what they were, but it wasn't in the resolution. And the feeling was that the board preferred to have it officially as part of the action.
I just want to be sure that because for some reason I have a different date written down for the second one. I want to be sure that the date is the same that Mr. Joseph initially said. Is it?
It's June 29th. That's the date.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions on the motion? Do we have to do it by roll call, or can we do oral?
You can do a voice vote or something like that.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion to include the dates? Opposed? Okay, thank you. Mr. Brentley, you still have the floor.
Yes, number two, I do have the same feelings that Dr. Holly has concerning Shenley. My concern is that just minutes away, we have our students at the Malines building, could be at some point full, and I just think it's a building that we should hold on to. It is a historic building. It's a wonderfully centrally located building in the college community. But my concern is that even if we're trying to sell it, my question, Mr. Joseph, did we do any national advertisement for the Shenley building?
We have not yet advertised for the sale of the building. This resolution would authorize us to advertise for the acceptance of sealed bids for this building.
Okay. Well, I mean, it just might be something that we want to do as well. I just want to remind board member, clearly can see that someone, in my opinion, wants to just remove all the valuable buildings that we have in this community. A year or so ago, we sold or gave away the Reisenstein building at a ridiculous rate, and here that community will be out if they ever decide. to put 2 or 3 schools together. It would be next to impossible for them to do. Now there's a possibility of something similar happening. The folks in that part of that community would be in the same boat. There's nothing large enough for them to really have to have a large amount of students there. So it concerns me, and I think we all should be very, very careful. The final one is on the tax increment. Now, Mr. Weiss, I realize this is just the formation of a committee, if I'm not mistaken, the number 3. But can you just briefly tell us what the purpose of the tax increment finding is supposed to do? Who is it targeted for?
This particular item, item C3 on page 5, the action is to create a tax increment financing committee consisting of a representative from each of the city, county, and the school district under the overall oversight of the Urban Redevelopment Authority. This is a proposal on the part of Pyatt, a developer, to develop a project in Market Square, roughly in the vicinity of the old National Record Mart, for those who may remember that. It will be a hotel, a retail, office. The purpose of the tax increment financing project, which will come back to you for final approval, is to allocate a portion of the increment in value and the taxes flowing therefrom to pay for certain public improvements, principally a parking garage, which is necessary to support the project. The district receives minimal taxes from this site now because it's largely, at best, underutilized and at worst, vacant. And when it's completed, the portion of the taxes that come to the district will be significant. This is the creation of a committee. It does not obligate the district to do anything more than participate in the formation of the plan. And ultimately, the plan will be presented to you for approval, and it is the decision of the board whether it wishes to participate at that time.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise the point that the purpose of this tax increment financing, if I'm not mistaken, is to be used in blighted areas and to encourage development and that sort of thing. And I just think at some point we need to wave our flag as a district. We should not be in the business of deferring, prolonging, or taking a portion of what is normally owed to us with what we're up against here. And so at some point, I know there's been several that's come before us. Last time I checked, that part of town is not blighted, but there's a unique way that some developers are able to label it and qualify for these dollars, but we have to remember that that is our only source of income as a district, and we just may want to wave our white flag in terms of watching and being very careful in the very near future if it's something that we need to either opt out or get further discussion on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Are there any further comments on C2A and 2B? Ms. Shealy.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. Dr. Lane, the overarching concern for me, and I think others have stated it, on 2B are the facilities at University Preparatory at Margaret Lyons, and that those facilities are not necessarily appropriate for high school children. And so while I am, at this point, willing to authorize the RFP for Schenley, because in my mind, part of a RFP is just a fishing expedition. I'm not so certain that I would be willing to close on the deal without having appropriate options for the children who attend UPratt. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Mr. McCray.
I also had a comment about the athletic wing of Schenley. The fact that it's tied into the heating plant of the main building causes a real problem of separating it. It's also in the plot, am I correct, Mr. Weiss, that we have to subdivide the plot in order to keep it out. So there's a lot of logistical problems with that. However, there is the possibility of discussing with whoever the buyer might be to maybe, well, that's part of the community input, is to maybe leave that open for them. So the pathway is still there. I just want to let people know that.
Well, if I can make a comment here, and I'm not commenting on the concerns expressed about the facilities. That's not my, I'm just want to make it clear that if the board, upon receipt of bids, has an expectation that there can be a dedication of these recreational facilities for school use, then that has to be in the bid document. You can't offer a property like this for sale and then expect a buyer to discuss that. And I must tell you, as a practical matter, that if the board, if a majority of the board expects the ultimate development of this property to include public access to those facilities, then we need to have a discussion about that in a planning meeting or an agenda review, and then I would suggest that you table 2B, because it is not prudent to spend money to advertise for bids, to put the operations office through the task of taking people through the building. It's a big demand on their staff time when you have that sort of a condition. Again, I'm not commenting on that view. I'm only telling you that really means we should not deal with Schenley right now and just deal with Overbrook, because that is a material issue. So I just want the board to understand that.
Mr. McCray, are you finished? Okay. Dr. Hawley.
I just want to reiterate my concerns that it's not just university prep, but when you make schools a 6 to 12, and you have a school like Obama where you have every sport that's offered in the district for middle school and high school, Peabody is not able to accommodate all of those sports. And not only are they not able to accommodate all those sports, but you also have to realize that in that whole community, other people actually vie to use those facilities, use that facility as well. I don't know what Dr. Walters is going to do about football season. You know, midget football starts in July. So we're going to be looking to use that field for the regular Obama / SciTech / university / football players to use that field. And then all of the midget teams in the East End, they want to use that field as well. So, I mean, there are a lot of community agencies that also use these facilities. It's not just the schools. And I know nobody wants to hear that, but we are a community that needs all of those facilities. We need that facility that's at Schenley. The school is not built to hold the numbers of middle school students that they have, and then the number of high school students that they have, and all of the sports that's offered. So I just wanted to put that out there. And university prep is going to be in that same position since you're moving the students from Brashear into that facility as well.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Mr. Eisler. You didn't put up your hand before? Okay. Mr. Sumter.
From the discussion that's been put forth so far, I think it might be prudent for this board to examine the recreation situation regarding the schools that have been mentioned. One of the advantages of University Preparatory School at Margaret Merlines is that Shenley Field is adjacent to the school, which, when I was at Shenley, we played Peabody on that field in football, such that it could be used for recreation. At some point, because of the agreement of the three schools, some of the folks were saying, well, why should we go to Obama? Why don't they come to us at Alliance for football? So I think the logistics of working this out. However, University Preparatory School at Markham Alliance does have 2 gymnasiums, but neither is as large as some of the gymnasiums that we have in the high schools. And the swimming pool, I haven't seen it in some time. You can't count the addition of other facilities in the Hill, such as the new YMCA, which, if it were free, might help alleviate the situation, but it is a fee basis facility. If we're serious about keeping the utilization of the facilities at Shenley in place, I would suggest that we table this item at this point, but not for any long, extended period of time. Better to get a better understanding of what we're talking about rather than just going ahead and not fully understanding the situation. The conditions of the buildings needs to be discussed also. I think it's a matter of the practicality and feasibility and likelihood that a developer would allow public access to that facility, or if it can be cordoned off, fenced off. It already can be easily separated by access because of the way it's just attached to the building. It's at the one corner. It used to be the boys' entrance, but it's attached to that end. And they've had night activities in the past there where they've only used that section of the building only, but that's when the school was open. So I would like to put forth a motion at this time that we table item C2B.
Is there a second to the motion? Okay, Sumter Hawley. Is there a discussion on the motion? Khaleesi? Mrs. Khaleesi, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I want to be clear that this item has gone through the Business and Finance Committee in long, in-depth conversation. I realize and I understand what everybody's concern is, especially with that part of the building that is somewhat separated from the main building. I also think it is what would drive a better sale, if I may, because if it's housing, it may be much more attractive with a, I don't know what you want to call it. Community amenities. Well, recreation center for, let's say, those specific units that could be in that building. I caution this board into tabling something that's already started and the community is aware of and the community is prepared for. You would have to start over again. I'm not sure that tabling this for more discussion will result in anything more than just delaying what I think we need to do. I think we should allow the process to continue and see what happens from there. I encourage you to not table the item, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I just want to, it's fascinating to listen now. And Doctor, my stomach is turning here because I'm trying to think what kind of money, or maybe Mr. Joseph, what was the total cost or general cost that we put into the Peabody building to prepare it for the IB program?
I don't have those numbers with me right now, but I could provide those to you at a later time.
Okay. Well, because really what we're talking about is a full circle for this program. The rightful fit, if we're looking at 900 plus students for Obama, a program that is growing, a program that is successful, should be where it started, right there at the Schenley Building. But it's just amazing. You know, you would think someone would have checked prior to the spending. So you know, look, I'll support this, but I just think you got to give Obama a place to grow. I think the old Schenley Building would allow it to grow. Secondly, there were community folks 4 or 5 years ago who suggested to us at least two independent companies who would come in and give us a real handle on what asbestos, if any, which I emphasize that's in the building. We just need to do that, move forward, allow them to stay in Peabody for the year, and prepare Schenley Building to move the Obama program there. It's also interesting that when we had the first round for the proposal for Schenley, very few of them talked about it. These contractors were moving in. They were not screaming asbestos, asbestos, asbestos. They were prepared to move in. And so we need to go and see what was marketed back then to help get folks to close the building, if that was really true. And we got to do that by getting an independent company in there. So I will support this, and I will support some study to find out if it's feasible for Obama, if they can fit. I'm sure they can fit into Schenley. And let's just move forward and put them there. Thank you.
Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. Because the words uncertainty were put out on this table, I think that's why we need to further talk about this so that we clear up any uncertainties, so we get more in-depth understanding of the condition of the buildings, the long-term viability of the buildings, the rationale for why decisions were made. So I think the conversation needs to be had, because there were some board members that weren't here when the conversations were had before, that it might help, it might, I think what I'm saying is that this board needs to be on firmer ground regarding this property before we move forward. Thank you.
Ms. Shealy and then Mr. Eisler.
I just need to make some comments about Peabody. Peabody has the largest gym in our district. And in its heyday probably hosted more than 3,000 students. So there's plenty of room for Peabody to grow, or for Obama to grow in Peabody. Full disclosure, I'm an alum, and I'm not that far out that the building could have changed that much in the 20 some odd years since I've been there. So I would not argue that Peabody is not an appropriate space for IB, or for any school of 800. Actually, my concern would be the opposite of that, is that the building is gigantic, and there's going to be empty space in it still. So Peabody is more than appropriately sized for the IB program, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Mr. Eisler.
I just want to be clear, there is a motion on the table, as I understand it, to table the sale, the bidding of Schenley. And that's primarily being done to determine whether or not, because we don't know this for fact, is the way I understand it, the athletic facilities can be separated from that building prior to the sale. Do we absolutely know that they cannot be? I mean, I want to know with
no, I don't know that.
Okay,
And
you don't know that.
But I do think the board needs to know, an ancillary question if this is tabled is the impact of that kind of decision on the marketability of
I'm
the
not
structure.
arguing, I'm absolutely not arguing that, Mr. Weiss. I'm not, just trying to determine, our primary responsibility is to educate the children of Pittsburgh. It is not to provide recreation services for all the children in the city of Pittsburgh. That is something that is reserved for the city. And we've gone through this every time we talk about fields, because there are city fields that we would like to use that oftentimes we can't get the permits because they're permitted to other people. We know that, and we're hoping that city parks and the school district will be able to work closer on these issues. We also know that when our facilities are open in the evening, it costs money, and we have to permit those and charge for those, that it's not just something we can give away as much as we would like to. And with the budgets the way they are, both for the school district and the city, we have to be very clear about what our affordability is, and I don't even want to get into that discussion about all of that, but it is a very, very complex situation. If, in fact, we do not know definitively that that building could not be separated, and again, I'm asking, I don't know, I think it is legitimate to table this for a month to determine whether or not that can be done, because what would be very, very bad for this district is if we do not table it and we let it go and people bid, and then all of a sudden we're told, yes, there's a possibility of separating it, and now we never put that in the bid agreement, and as you said, Mr. Weiss, you can't do it after the fact. So it's a legitimate request and a legitimate question being asked by some members of this board. Can that be separated? We don't know that. Can we redo the bid agreement if it can be? The answer to that is yes, right? So I think the unknown is whether or not that particular part of the facility can be separated. And I'm not hearing definitively, and I've not heard definitively from anybody in the district that it can't be.
Well, and I think the appropriate thing to do, if this motion to table is approved, is to charge the facilities department and appropriate engineering resources to give the board a definitive answer. I would believe it should not take long to get an answer. So I would expect that, at least in terms of that uncertainty, that should be removed in time for the board to be in a position to consider this next month, if in fact that's the board's desire.
Thank you, Mrs. Khaleesi.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. At our Business and Finance Subcommittee meeting, we asked that very question, and we were told clearly that the unit was combined and could not be separated. The heating system is combined, and they cannot be separated. We asked that question. That's why I'm answering it. That's all I'm trying to tell you, what I was told.
Mr. Eisler.
And again, Mrs. Khaleesi, in all due respect to the committee and the board members that sit on that committee, the heating units cannot be separated. I understand that. But that doesn't mean that the buildings can't be separated, the actual physical facility. And that's what I'm most concerned about. It may be prohibitive to put in another heating unit. That's something else this board has to consider. This board does not have money. This state is not allowing capital projects. I mean, that legislation is racing through Harrisburg. PlanCon is changing. So we don't have any support really outside of the district if we're going to take on more debt. I don't think any of us want to take on more debt. All I'm trying to determine is, with this resolution and with this 1 month tabling that is proposed, can that building be separated? If it is, a whole new heating unit has to be, it may be prohibitive in costs, but at least we know that.
Dr. Hawley.
Or we could share a portion of the gas, the utilities, in order to keep that part of the building open. Because right now, what's going to end up happening for Obama is we're going to have to rent somewhere for some of the middle school students to have some of their activities, because the building is not big enough. The gym is big enough for you to host a nice size basketball game, but it's not big enough for us to have 2 games going on at one time at the league's regulations. And those are the problems that we face when you try to use a building that's built for a high school. Now you want to have a middle school and a high school together, but they all have their own sports. I mean, it's just not going to work. We're going to have to pay somewhere. You either pay it at Schindler, or you're going to have to pay it at some other organization within the neighborhood. And they are expensive.
Is this on the motion to table it? Mr. McCray?
The original motion, did it actually specify 30 days on the tabling? No. It just said table, am I correct? If the staff can get us the document that they need, the information that is in my head already that I understand, so that everybody else can understand it, at the Education Committee meeting, could we hold a special meeting then and vote on it as opposed to waiting? Because I know there are time constraints for people. Is it?
Well, I don't like to assume how much time something will take for a profession I don't practice. I think we ought to, what I would recommend that the administration do, assuming this is tabled, is to charge the facilities department and such outside resources as they need to give the board an answer. And if we have an answer in time to consider this prior to the regular meeting in May, we can deal with that and advertise a special meeting. But I think we should not I don't recommend putting a deadline on it before we know the scope of the work.
Then can I amend a motion to be for the next legislative meeting, that be pulled off the table?
Who made the motion?
Mr. Sumter made the motion, Dr. Hawley seconded it.
I think the problem that happens is that when an interested party says they want a building, that's what drives the process. So the thought that that person might lose interest is the concern with the haste and why we have to press forward. We shouldn't do what we need to do in a deliberate manner, whether it takes a long time or a short period of time. It might take a couple weeks, it might be a day or two, or if it needs to take longer, then that's what it needs to do. That's why I didn't specify any time period in the motion I made. I'm hopeful that the administration has heard this conversation and understands what we're talking about, and to the extent they can provide us with the information that we desire, and there may be other questions or concerns that I think it is most rude when other board members are talking while someone has the floor. That's why I don't want to micromanage this. Whatever we need to do, we just do it. If it takes long, if it takes short. But I think the gist of, and it's not just about separating the building, the other conversations regarding the feasibility of the buildings can also be addressed at that same meeting. So that we have an understanding, so that we don't keep going meeting after meeting after meeting talking about the past, but rather what we're going to do in the future for our children. We have to make sure that our children have adequate recreation facilities available to them, and I think that's what's driving this conversation in total. So as we can deal with each of these items that are put before us, we should do so. So I'd rather keep the motion as stated. And if it is done faster, it allows for that. Hopefully it won't take longer, but hopefully it can be addressed before the end of next month. Thank you.
Mr. McCray, okay, all right. Dr. Lane.
Clearly, we will do whatever the board's desire. I'll say that first, but I think that I want to have you think about at least a couple of things in regard to this exploration of dividing the building. One thing, most developers are not going to be, let's say, overwhelmingly interested in sharing space with high school students for a lot of reasons, especially if it would be property that was residential. I think that would be a detriment to trying to sell the property. So I think we need to keep that in mind. And furthermore, I believe that it's probably possible to divide it. I mean, if you have enough money, you can do pretty much what you want with a building. The question, of course, would be what is the cost attached to making that division? And I'm not an architect. I'm not going to pull a number out of the air. but my guess would be it would be fairly substantial. So I just want, I understand and I clearly hear the concern around appropriate recreational facilities for our students, which I think is an important value to hold. But I don't want you to hold out a lot of hope that this is going to be a feasible route, but we will explore it if you so desire.
Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I just want to say that I don't support the time limit. Allow the staff to do some kind of feasibility study, but I also want to put on the immediate list, Dr. Lane, the concerns that Dr. Hawley shared about Obama not having this year enough facilities to run their programs, including the sports program for middle school students. If our staff can also look into the possibility of access to the Peabody building. I don't know logistically if that's possible, but if it's if there's an opportunity for someone to study that and to still allow those students to have access to some kind of sporting programs in the Peabody School. Secondly, I also want to mention, if it's true, and I don't know, Ms. Sheila, you said that Peabody has the largest gym in the building. I don't know that. Well, if that's the case, then we have a lot of homework to do as a board. Then we need to put Peabody on the table, Shenley on the table, and the old, where the Obama is, not the old Peabody, I guess. But we need to put that on the table to really look at where we can put the best fit for this program. And then finally, I don't support any kind of chopping up of the building. I mean, I understand making the facilities available. No, I want it all or nothing for our children. And I can't imagine how you can divvy up that building, cut off the gym and make it available to the public with still making it a good-looking building. Secondly, I don't know if we would be allowed to do that. If it is a historic landmark, I thought there were certain rules that you couldn't change the structure of the building or so on and so on. And maybe that's another question that the staff can look into. So for down the road, I do not support cutting anything up. It is a wonderful facility for our students, and I think they should have access to it. Dr. Lane, I want to ask that if I can direct to you the group of folks who raised questions 6 years ago when we first had the closing of the building, the hoax, that they had an independent company that could come in and to really evaluate. Would you be willing to meet with them and give them access to the building to at least to see what the possibilities are?
Let me back up to the historic landmark issue first. And if my understanding of this historic landmark law is correct, and I believe I'm right on this, it really prohibits you from making changes to the exterior of the building. In terms of dividing things on the inside of a building, you have leeway to do that. And if that were not the case, probably most people would never buy a historic building because you couldn't do anything with it. So that's one thing. Back to your question around going back and revisiting the asbestos issue. Mr. Brentley, I met with individuals in regard to this several years ago, and we have a report that was done by a very reputable company that gave us information in regard to the asbestos contained in the Shenley facility. So I don't see that there's a lot of reason for us to go back and revisit that again. However, in regard to the second issue of is it possible to divide or not, we certainly will explore that if it is the board's desire.
Okay. Well, you know, I think at some point we have to kind of open it up a little and see if there are other companies out there who can find a way to make this thing go. And if there are other companies, I think we should at least entertain a meeting with them to see, let them look over the previous report. That was the concern that when the building was closed, that it was one-sided. We didn't do our work with getting other opinions and really checking. There were some that even went as far as to say it was just not true on the numbers that were put out there for the repairs. So we need to find a way to discuss them and find a way to get their opinions as well. So I support the building for our students, not any piece or division of the building. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Fink, is this on the motion to table?
It's on the general discussion.
Can you hold it? Because I have you for the general discussion on it. We're on the motion to table. Anything else on the motion to table? Okay, Mr. Weiss.
This is the motion to table. Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
No.
Mrs. Fink?
No.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler? Yes. Mr. McCray?
No.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
No.
All right, the motion to table carries 5-4. So the business report will not, you will not be voting on C2B.
Okay, now, Mrs. Fink, you had your hand up, and then Mrs. Khaleesi, and then Mr. Brentley.
Not to belabor the point, but the building's been closed for years. We haven't talked about using any portion of the building. The asbestos is one issue in that building. The entire ventilation system and the heating system are other issues in that building. The cosmetic repair of the plaster, well, safety issues. There's a lot of issues with that building in addition to the asbestos. We have not, this whole thing about the use of the phys ed facilities has come up very recently. We pretty much made a decision years ago that the building was too expensive to rehabilitate as a high school, and that we were going to make an effort to sell the building. If I were a developer, I would want the phys ed facilities as an amenity for people who would buy the condos or rent the apartments or whatever they want to do with it. It's going to be an extremely expensive rehabilitation effort, and if somebody wants to take that on and put that building back on the tax rolls, not only for the building itself, but for the wage tax of the people that would be living there, I don't know how we can turn our back on an effort like that. There has to be other ways to meet the phys ed needs of the children in the schools. Obama has decent phys ed facilities. The SciTech building is probably not going to be adequate for high school kids, which is why they've combined these schools. There's a lot of issues around this. There are possible other solutions. We may be able to work out something with the new Y. Those are things that we would have to explore. But, the vote is already taken, the thing is postponed, but we're way beyond asbestos removal as an issue with the physical plant in that building.
Thank you, Mrs. Fink. Mrs. Khaleesi, did you want to talk on 2A or 2B? Mr. Brentley, were you going to talk on 2A or 2B? Okay. All right. Now we'll move on to numbers 3, and you were first on the list for that.
Thank you. Mr. Weiss's earlier I'm sorry, I did have one additional question. If the committee would recommend a TIF, would we have a presentation, a full presentation in the Business and Finance Committee meeting to understand what they were asking?
That's a decision for the chair, but it certainly can be done.
So I would just like to make a suggestion to the chair.
It will definitely be done.
Thank you very much. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on number 3? Mr. Brentley? None? Okay, Mr. Sumter.
I have a question. Does anybody know what the TIF limit is?
Right.
Nobody knows that right now? Thank you.
We did get that, though.
I'm just saying. That's all I asked.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't ask where it is.
Okay, Mr. Weiss, can we take a roll call vote, please? Okay, Mr. Brentley. Okay. Wait a minute, is this on number 3? Go ahead.
The TIF limit is actually 10%, and currently, I believe we're at 6.6%.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And this is on number 7. Okay, then, because again, this is the first time we're doing this, we'll go ahead with it. But I would ask that next month you read your agenda prior to the meeting so that when we come to the meeting, you'll be able to give me the numbers you want to discuss.
You keep in mind,
Thank you.
you have to keep in mind that a lot of discussion brings other questions for board members, and we should not be hindered if we decide to raise those questions. I want to raise a question on number 7, and this is enter into a contract for $180,000 for an overarching strategic community plan. Dr. Lane, can you tell me what is an overarching strategic community plan?
And I'm sorry, Mr., what page are you on? I'm sorry.
It is on page 4 of 7.
Okay, 4.7. This is to hire, it's not a community plan, actually, it's a communications plan. And one of the things that we have as a part of our process with Empowering Effective Teachers is a communications audit. And there were some things that were stated in our audit where they believe we had some gaps. One of the gaps was needing to have such a plan developed. Because our internal communications department has had substantial reduction over the last few years, most of their time, virtually all of their time, is taken with addressing the district's regular day-to-day needs, communicating our press releases, providing information to the board in regard to things that have taken place, that type of thing, and information to the, making arrangements with the media for whether it's print or television to do interviews, that kind of thing. So the regular day-to-day work is pretty well absorbed all their time. Because this is a one-time thing, it was the kind of thing that appeared to be most appropriately done by a consultant rather than by hiring staff. And so that's why this is on for you this evening. And this project is not supported by our operating budget, as you're aware. It is supported by our supplemental funds, and specifically the Gates Foundation grant.
Okay. Doctor, as I shared before, because we hear the comment often, but this is not, these are different from a separate, different pot of money. You know, Doctor, this does not sound right at all. You know, with all of these things we're talking about in terms of what we're pulling back from the students, you know, we're not, I mean, or at least your staff is not acting like we're in a financial crisis here. You know, it is hard to justify $180,000 for for an overarching strategic community communications plan. Then what were we working off of before? Then what were we doing up to this point? And so if the Gates people are telling us you're not spending enough money in communications and marketing, is that what you're suggesting to us?
No, the direction or the information we had was not that we were not spending enough money. The direction was that our audit revealed, this is not the Gates Foundation, our audit revealed that they believed we needed to create such a plan. Our staff can't do it. We have the funding available through our grant to do it that is actually part of our plan. So that's what we're saying. We're not stating we were directed to spend more money. We're saying that we need the communication plan. And I understand the issue has arisen before about the difference between the operating budget and our supplemental funds budgeting. And I know it's very difficult for members of the community and others to see things going through on supplemental funds that we probably wouldn't be able to do on our operating fund, to be very honest. We know that. However, we are in some ways a better position than some other districts that we do have access to supplemental funds to pay for part of our reform agenda items like this one. And furthermore, I know that I'm sure the community understands that money that comes in supplemental funds is designated money. We could not use it to put back maybe some of the things we'd love to have in our operating budget. It can't be used that way. It has to be used specifically for the things for which it was granted. This is one of the things for which it was granted, and that's why it's coming through this fund. And as I said, this is not something where you'd actually hire someone, since this is a do it and be done kind of thing. So we felt it was a better way to handle it, to have a consultant do it. And as I said, it has the money that is available for it is designated for it. So couldn't be used to backfill some of the other things we might like to backfill.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to express my disappointment, Doctor. This is about the third, fourth time in the last 8, maybe 10 months. You know, just recently we approved communications and marketing, 3 separate contracts, nearly $500,000 to 3 contractors, almost on hold, that we can call them up, hey, write us, you know, make us a postcard, okay, send out thousands. But hey, doctor, that's, you know, no one is really looking at how that looks. And with this 180,000, you know, we're $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 into communications, just communications alone. And it's waste for me. It's just clearly waste. And not to mention those 3 contractors. How did we allow them to put in a clause that gives them an automatic renewal? And so it's almost like we tell the public one thing, we're cutting back, and parents, you got to prepare no activities for your middle school kids, but we turn back around and we continue to spend and to give these contracts out. I don't support it, and it's just fascinating, the nerve of continuing to put this, to put it through. And on top of that, we see very little difference, maybe an extra postcard, or I'll get, you know, the 5th calendar in the mail. I mean, I get one to my wife, one to myself, one to my son, then there's one that comes to the family. And you know, at some point, somebody's got to begin to remind us that these are real dollars, and if the public is watching, I don't think the public is concerned that it's coming from the Gates or it's coming from another pot of money. It is still a duplication of service. It is still something at times that other folks can get access to in terms of having an opportunity to bid and to get to it. So I will not be supporting it, and I would encourage you, Dr. Lane, please share with your staff, if we're asking everybody else to tighten their belt, then it should apply to communications and marketing and any and other department that is spending and still sending items before us that are consultant-based items. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brantley. Ms. Fischetti.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. I would like the opportunity to clarify for the viewing public that when we do contracts, they are based on not to exceed amounts. Those contracts are simply in place so that we can access services on an as-needed basis. That does not mean that once we do a contract, we spend all the way up to the not to exceed amount. In fact, when these 3 contracts were passed by the board, there was only $20,000 from the marketing and communications budget attached to these contracts. In fact, these contracts are often accessed by other departments that have supplemental funds that don't go through our general operating budget. So I would like the public to know that we are not on a spending spree. In fact, we're very judicious about the way that we try to communicate, and it is why we are very proud that every time we do our annual survey, we have an increasing number of our parents and families that are telling us that they are on the internet. And we will look forward to doing more effective communications very cost-effectively via the internet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fischetti. Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call vote, please?
So on the business agenda, Mr. Brantley.
I'll be voting yes on the report. I'll be voting on no on C3 and no on page 4, number 7, the duplication of services, overarching strategic communications.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
I'll be voting yes on the report as a whole and no on number 7.
It's on page 4, is that right, Dr. Hawley? Okay. Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes on the report as a whole, no on item B7 on page 4, no on item C3 on page 5.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Let's now move on to the report on personnel that includes addendums A, B, C, and D that are before you. Before we begin discussion on the report, I'd like to call to your attention 2 resolutions. I'd like to ask Dr. Lane to please read these resolutions.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. We're recognizing staff in both of these resolutions. The first one is National Administrative Professionals Day, which is today. The Board of Public Education of the School District of Pittsburgh wishes to recognize the efforts of the administrative professionals of the School District of Pittsburgh. Whereas in 2012, Administrative Professionals Week is celebrated April 22nd to 28th, and today, April 25th, is officially Administrative Professionals Day. And whereas the administrative professionals of the School District of Pittsburgh provide essential services to keep our schools and offices running smoothly and efficiently. And whereas they often serve as a welcoming front face of the district to our students, families, and community, and help to improve public confidence. And whereas their contributions are integral to the efficient and effective support operations for all students, families, teachers, and administrators, and therefore the Board of Education of the School District of Pittsburgh would like to acknowledge the 60th anniversary of National Administrative Professional Day on April 25th, 2012, and commend the efforts made each day in and day out by all of the administrative professionals across the district.
Thank you, Dr. Lane.
Okay, and our second resolution, this is actually Paraprofessional Week, and I was kindly given this Paraprofessional Pride button by the president of the PFT, Ms. Nina Esposito-Vasquez, who is with us this evening. The Board of Public Education of the School District of Pittsburgh wishes to recognize the efforts of the paraprofessionals of the School District of Pittsburgh. Whereas the paraprofessionals of the School District of Pittsburgh provide a critical service to the children and teachers of the district on a daily basis, and whereas they serve a student population of over 25,000 children every day with great skill, compassion, and sensitivity, and whereas their contribution is essential in allowing for the efficient daily operation of the district, and therefore the Board of Education of the School District of Pittsburgh wishes to acknowledge National Paraprofessional Appreciation Day on April 4th, 2012, and it further wishes to express its gratitude and appreciation for the efforts made every day by all of our paraprofessionals across the district.
Thank you, Dr. Lane. Are there any questions on the report on personnel? Ms. Shealy.
Just on items A, 12 through 16. These are people being hired as light cleaners or firemen. I believe in the fall we furloughed a lot of people who were in this job category. Are these recalls, or we did not furlough light cleaners?
Yes, these are.
These are recalls?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. I got another one. P2. I lost my page. 13, on page 13. What does that position do, or should it do?
Actually, what this individual has been doing is working with our Promise Readiness Corps. And what they're going to be doing is assisting with the planning around the plan for next year for Westinghouse High School.
I'm not sure I get the correlation, but, yeah, I'm not sure that I understand that at all, and I can't even form a question to get at what's confusing me. So I think I'll leave that alone, but I don't think I can support that one for a lot of reasons. My last item is number G24 on page 9. I would just like to acknowledge, because I believe the person who's sitting next to me may not acknowledge the retirement of Mrs. Sarah Sumter, the principal of Sterrett, which is in my district. As a representative, Mrs. Sumter is a pleasure to work with. And she is a wonderful person, and I wish her the best in retirement. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on personnel? Mr. Brentley Khaleesi.
Yes, I have a question on number 13, P13, number 1, and this is the change of the principal at Westinghouse High School. And Doctor, you know my position on this. I've shared this many times during the challenges of Westinghouse over the last year. But for the life of me, I just don't get this. I'm sorry. Westinghouse was a combination of things that simply didn't go well. And I think we acknowledge that. It does not fall squarely in any one person's lap. And what we're attempting here to do this evening is to make the former principal or co-principal the scapegoat for many, many problems. Primarily when we opened the school, it was, staff wasn't trained. We had a massive PR campaign. We had billboards and taking out, single gender at Westinghouse, and people in the community would say, what's a single gender? Because no one never discussed it with them. It was just bad all over. People were running, spending money, and there was no connection. It was bad, and we as an administration and the board have to take responsibility for that. This young man, Mr. McNeil, was just not properly trained and was not put in a position where the staff was 100% behind him. It is what it is. But one thing as professionals, we're human. Our staff is human, and we make mistakes. But when we make mistakes, we have to be honest enough to come to the table and to adjust. Use Westinghouse as a learning tool, but do not put any particular blame on one individual. And this hurts me as a young man, African-American man, who had said he would love to serve and to continue to serve if there was some support from this administration. And it's fascinating for us to now bring it forward. And I got to tell you, for 13 years on the board, I can't recall the last time I've seen, besides someone's name, the word provisional in parentheses. In parentheses. We have others individuals who are expressing an interest of not staying or being in Westinghouse. This young man wants to stay. And why can't we support him? And I'm just, we differ on this one. A lot of things we didn't do. Individuals who wanted to meet, we wouldn't meet with them. Other folks who said do this, we didn't do that. But this makes, if I'm not mistaken, the second or the third African-American male that we've run out of this district, or that we have demoted or have not been in support of them. And I tell you, Doctor, out of all the questionable things that I've seen tonight and in the past, this one's going to stick with me because we can count almost on one hand or two hands the African-American men here in this area. And remember, this man was simply put in a position and trying to do the best that he could possibly do. there was lack of support from our part. And we should not hold this man responsible. He should not be demoted. He should be reinstated back at Westinghouse. And so I do not support this. I would encourage my colleagues. We would never do this anywhere else. You would never go into a failed program and take the principal that was not trained and say, we're going to demote you provisional. You just don't do it. And so also there are some other recommendations in this month that disturbs me. It was raised in terms of lack of African Americans being placed, and so that disturbs me as well. And it also disturbs me too that some that we're placing in positions, which I won't get into any names, that we're placing in positions almost as if to take care of individuals. And once again, if we're cutting and if we're adjusting, then let's find a place that matches them. Let's just not do something because someone may be a buddy or someone works with this one or whatever. And so it just disturbs me. So I'm not going to go into detail. I am disappointed in the administration for bringing forward the recommendations for these new appointments, and also definitely doubly disappointed that you're making this recommendation. And regardless of how it looks here, this is a demotion for Mr. Sean McNeil, a young man, a father who has worked hard and tried to make the best that he could possibly best. He is not responsible for problems that this administration did not do correctly. So I will not be supporting it, and I'm asking that my colleagues would join the same and reinstate this young man. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Khaleesi.
I just wanted to also congratulate the individuals that are here or on the list this evening that are retiring. I'm sure Mr. Sumter, Mrs. Sumter have major plans, and I hope they do, and I hope they enjoy life the way God intended them to. But I'd also like to recognize that we do have our own administrative assistant sitting right there behind us that's there at every meeting, is there for all 9 of us, has always been a dedicated employee to us, and I just think that she should be recognized, and that would be Ms. Wenger. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fink.
I too want to congratulate Sarah Sumter on her retirement. She worked at Carrick for many years. She worked her way up from a teacher, ended up there as a vice principal. In that capacity, I'm sure she dealt with my own angelic children a few times. And they're all still alive, so this is wonderful. And I just wish Sarah the best. She's been a real asset to the Pittsburgh Public Schools.
Thank you, Mrs. Fink. Dr. Hawley.
I too want to congratulate all of my former colleagues and welcome them to the land of retirement. However, what they'll find out is they're not really retired. There's always another little activity for them to do in the world of education. But I want to say congratulations to all of them who have decided to move on and do some other activities. I too want to, I would like to ask about number 2 on page 13. What budget is this coming out of?
I'm not sure, Dr. Hawley. Perhaps Dr. Atua can answer that question. It's the school improvement grant.
So these people were, this position was actually written into the grant?
Answer was yes, for the record.
Okay. And I too, I just like to know, what is it that they're supposed to be doing? Are they writing curriculum? Since you call them a curriculum
Perhaps Dr. Atua can provide greater detail.
Christiana Atua, yes, they are working with teachers. She is working with teachers to support them in implementing the curriculum. She was part of the school improvement grant because we know that the teachers need support in their school.
Okay, so she's moving from curriculum coordinator from Malines to Westinghouse. Was it successful at Malines?
Yes, it was. And also she's been working at Westinghouse starting, I think, since October. So she's been supporting Western House.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Can I clarify one thing?
Yeah.
Dr. Toole, was I incorrect on Promise Readiness Corps? Because if I was wrong, please correct that.
No, you're not. The purpose of the curriculum coordinator is to support the teachers, so all students are Promise Ready.
But I don't think Westinghouse was even a part of, or Malines.
No,
when
but
you had that little chart to show,
no, they are not officially, but we are hoping that the strategies that they've worked with us before, that she's worked with me before in the ALA, we will take into the schools. The teaming, the supporting of the teachers, and also see how we could support teachers by using data available to look at the instructional program.
I'm not talking, I'm just concerned about the actual position, not so much the person, because I haven't seen a definition as to, or a job description as to what this person actually does. Even if it's written into the SIG grant, it should have some definition as to exactly what this person is supposed to be doing with teachers.
I can send it to you. We have it.
Okay, because I didn't see that while I was visiting. Okay, and also I want to reiterate the concerns that I have with number 1 in this section. The problem that I'm having primarily is the provisional status. Again, that only means temporary. You tried to explain that to me. You did explain it. You didn't try to explain it. You did explain it. I'm not in agreement with that language being placed in this document. So I won't be supporting that, and we probably will be defeated in this area. But I'm hoping that if indeed this particular person is going to be here next year, that he will be allowed to go to a position where he is not losing any salary, and that we are looking at doing satisfactory work here. I'm really concerned about the fact, I'm going to agree with Mr. Brentley, I'm really concerned about the fact that we want to make sure that we are supporting our administrators as much as possible so that they can be successful in any job that we actually give them. But I don't think that we gave the type of support that was needed for a school like Westinghouse. And I think that we can all agree that there were major problems when it opened, but then when we were able to get some facts about how we could support the school, we changed the school back to the way it was last year. But then we went on and gave not only this gentleman, but I have to say, we did the same thing to the other principal as well. So I'm a little disappointed in the way these people were treated. But I will not be supporting this primarily because of the provisional status that's there. I'm not in disagreement that, we gave him another job, but I am going to be not voting on this because of the provisional status there.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Mr. Eisler.
I too want to comment on people who are retiring. I mean, every year we lose great people who decide that their service to our children is over. Sarah Sumter's somebody that when I needed to meet with her, I used to stop at the building at 6 or 6:30 in the evening. She was never anybody who went home early. I'm sure Mr. Sumter can attest to that. Went through a building program with her that was pretty stunning, and her ability to work with the community is second to none. And I learned a tremendous amount from that woman in terms of her working with the community, working with the local police, working with the neighbors, working with the other community organizations that was in that district, and have the utmost respect for her. And she is going to be missed. And I would also like to say that she and her husband are huge supporters of the Pittsburgh Promise, as you hear from Mr. Sumter every single board meeting. But they're people that have stepped up for the children of Pittsburgh, and for that I have a great deal of respect for them. Thank you, Mrs. Asuda.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. Mr. McCray.
It's a tough act to follow, but I agree with you, Mr. Eisler. We're losing a lot of good people, and top on the list is Sarah. Of course, now, we had our little conversation when Dr. Harris was here, the astronaut. That was great. So retirement sounds like a great idea, so maybe I'll do that. Anyway, I also want to thank all of our employees that are in the military for a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Any other questions on personnel report? Okay, Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Brentley?
I'll be voting no on the entire report.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes on the report as a whole, no on P1 and P2, number 2.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
No on item P2, yes on the rest of the items.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes on the report as a whole. I'll be abstaining on item G24 on page 9. I'll be voting no on P1 and P2 on page 13.
Mrs. Asuda?
Yes.
Okay, the report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. I'd like to now call the board's attention to the financial statements dated January 31st, 2012, February 29th, 2012, and March 31st, 2012. We have 2 transfer funds before us this evening, Mr. Weiss. Before we move on to questions, will we be voting on these transfers as 2 separate votes or together as 1 vote?
You can vote them. You can vote them together.
You can or you cannot?
can.
Can, okay. Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Eisler.
Mr. Joseph, I noticed in the transfer of funds that we're transferring a fairly hefty amount from the object dealing with natural gas. I'm assuming that's because we had a rather light winter.
Yes, that's due to the light winter and the relatively low natural gas prices that we were able to lock in.
And the way your office has been really purchasing over time has been quite smart, so that's great. The other question I have is, knowing that revenues are a little bit down from the projected, is that due to the fact that tax collections were delayed a month?
Correct.
Any other things that we should be worried about? I mean, are we going to start to see the uptick coming in the next couple of months as people pay their taxes?
We should start to see the uptick in real estate as taxes come in from the rebate period, and we should also start to see the uptick from earned income tax collections in June.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Thank you, Mrs. Asuda.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. Any other questions? Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call vote, please?
This is a vote on both transfer items, 2011 general fund budget and 2012. Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Asuda?
Yes.
Okay, both of those items are approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Moving on to new business, there are 2 new business resolutions on our legislative agenda this evening. The first is for the 14th annual Take a Father to School Day. I would like to ask Mr. Brentley to please read the resolution at this time.
No, where is it at? I'm so. Okay, let's. Here we are. Okay, this is the resolution of the Board of Education's Pittsburgh Public School. This is for the 2012, May 18th is 2012 Take a Father to School Day. Whereas May 18th has been designated as Take a Father to School Day in Pittsburgh Public Schools, whereas all district fathers are being asked to participate in the Yes, I Can campaign, whereas the district would like to acknowledge the following organizations for their support of this year's Take a Father to School Day: Mad Dads, the Pittsburgh chapter, A+, the A+ Men, Coalition for Fathers and Families, and the Allegheny Family Network, and Early Childhood Educational Male Fathers Involvement Initiative. And now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Public Education recognized May 18th, 2012 as the 14th annual Take a Father to School Day. The board recognizes a significant increase in participation, 4,874 in 2009 to 5,617 in 2011. Board encourages all fathers to bring used eyeglasses, canned food, and non-perishable items to their child's school to be donated to the community food banks and distributed to local organizations and national organizations to distribute of eyeglasses to the needy. Our definition of the fathers on that day is a positive male role model in the life of a child. The Board of Public Education urges all members of the school district and community to actively support and participate in a worthwhile event.
Second.
Are there any questions, comments?
You know, I do want to add that the actual day is May 18th, but on May 12th, we are still looking for 100 men to stand with us in Pittsburgh City Council. We do it every year. Last year we came close. We believe because this year we were one of the grand prize national winners of the Magna Award that we should get our 100 men. 9:45 in front of the City County building. We then move up May 8th. May 8th. Yes, thank you. Yes, it is. Thank you. May 8th, 9:45, front of the City County building. We move upstairs at 10. City Council will call us forward. We would then accept the proclamation. We will publicly recite our commitment to the Pittsburgh Public Schools and the children of this city by reading the Litany of Commitment prepared by Dr. Wayne Walters. Immediately following that, we will move downstairs in front of the City County building. We will then order 100 box lunches for the men to fellowship, get a copy of the school program directory. This is a list where all the schools have put out in advance their particular activities for that day. We'll also have additional support items for fathers, other father agencies, and we hope to have a few items to raffle off to the guys too. So anybody out there want to donate something, we can more than happy to accept it. And finally, as I mentioned earlier this month, earlier this meeting, we are encouraging our fathers to become father greeters in those particular schools. We are well aware of in some schools that we are reaching 100, 200 in some schools. And so we know that there's a lot of bodies to manage. And so we're asking some of those men to register in the schools, become a father greeter, get there early, help out, assist, and follow the direction of that principal. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Any other comments on this resolution? Okay, Mr. Weiss?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
The new business items approved.
Thank you.
One other thing I just wanted to mention, what each board member have in front of them, and I didn't explain that. This is just a miniature version of the Magna Award. There's one here for each. And Dr. Lane, if you could, please just let me know who, in terms of our employees, were responsible for the wonderful cake that we have outside in the hallway, and who was responsible for the beautiful sign that we have up there that's dedicated to the fathers and men in this school district. If you can please mention their names so that we can give them their props, please.
Miss Jean McMullen, I know, worked on the poster, and I believe that Robin Winger helped with this project as well. And Miss Lisa Fischetti assisted as well in getting it ready for this evening.
It's a delicious looking cake and a very wonderful sign, and on behalf of the committee, we say thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the second new business resolution before us is from the Committee on Education requesting the development of a teacher furlough process that puts children first. I would like to ask Ms. Shealy to please read the resolution at this time.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. There are a series of whereases that I will not read and start with just the resolution. Now therefore be it resolved, the superintendent is directed to work with the leadership of the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers to improve the current furlough process for teachers in order to consider factors beyond seniority in light of the growing body of evidence around teacher effectiveness, as well as the disproportionate impact that seniority-based furloughs may have on the district's most vulnerable schools. The superintendent shall update the board in June 2012 regarding the ability of the district and the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers to reach agreement on an improved teacher furlough process that would be feasible and could meet the August 1st, 2012 completion date for staffing schools for the 2012-13 school year.
Sheila Eisler. Comment?
Yeah, I was essentially, or there are several reasons why I present this resolution to the board. But the testimony on Monday night at public hearing was very compelling. And while there is record of that, I would actually like to quote a couple of statements that we heard on Monday. First, I'll quote Mr. Salim Gabriel, the executive director of the Pittsburgh Promise. I plead with our union, our management, and our directors to be motivated only by that which best serves our kids. This is not the time to settle for self-preservation when the window is now open for heroic leadership that truly puts the best interests of students ahead of any individual agenda or job. When we do that, we are not just laying the foundation for a brighter future for students, but for an entire region. I would also like to quote Ms. Janelle Henry very quickly, a kindergarten teacher at Faison. Simply put, our students respond to stability and great teaching. I quote Ms. Henry to point out Faison will be greatly affected by the furloughs and bumping that furloughs cause for next school year. The district, the federal government, and possibly state government have put a lot of money into Faison, and we have only had 1 year to get that program going and started. I don't think anyone intended a 1-year shot at getting Faison turned around. Faison has traditionally been one of our lowest performing schools in the district, and it is predominantly or vastly majority African American and low income. And the students deserve stability, and they deserve a chance to get to know the teachers, and the teachers deserve a chance to get to know those students, so that the children get an opportunity to thrive. And so this resolution is around imploring you, Dr. Lane, to try to work with the union to protect our most vulnerable students, to help us find new ways of keeping our most effective teachers in front of our most needy students. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Are there any other comments on the resolution? Mr. Brentley.
Yes, it would have been a wonderful opportunity if we could have had a discussion prior to this, and I know we were tight and running. I just want to say that I understand the intent, but it is not just the issue of the furlough process of teachers. There are other pressing issues. They're still addressing the issue at Westinghouse. This is an issue of transportation in a couple of months, where a lot of kids will not have access with their bus passes. Hours have been changed. These kids are going to have to get up much earlier, 5 o'clock in the morning. It's a safety issue, early start time. There are a lot of other issues. So I would have supported this if we would have said this as a conversation, or as I put it before, some kind of emergency meeting where we can look at all of these issues that are pressing. It is more than just this. But the second issue that really concerns me, Salim Gabril's a brother that I love, a brother from another mother. But we have to be very careful on setting policy based upon what others are directing us to do, especially when there's a contractual agreement that is in place. Especially when we're attempting to address this issue of seniority. That is the core of what unions and memberships are about. You know, and I got to say it is slightly personal. I am a member of a union, okay? And I know how people fight to get to that seniority so they can have access to in-grade pay, so that they can get the benefits and choose day shift versus night shift. There are benefits for being around. At the same time, there are issues that we must address around our students, but it is not just that issue. So I understand the intent. I would have not liked to see anything before me like this. I would have loved an opportunity of just suggesting to the union, is there an opportunity for some discussion? And I would not put this on this administration. If we're going to have that kind of discussion, that circle must be broad. It must be so inclusive so that everything is out for discussion. For instance, we are moving on, we just did tonight, we are moving on a handful of African-American principals here. Well, is there an opportunity to talk about a creative way of going and getting more African-Americans into these schools who can speak the language? You know, is there another way that we can talk about this thing? So it's little, takes me a little in a different direction. Appreciate the intent, cannot support this. But I would love to have a discussion around all of the pressing issues. And while we're dealing a discussion around that, but also a discussion around all of the initiatives over the last 5 years to evaluate them. We are almost in a position of, this is a fallout of the previous 5 years. We're putting out fires because things were not thought out well enough, and we can't narrow it down and say, put it on the lap, it's the union's fault. You just can't do that. So I understand it. I will not be supporting it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bruntley. Mr. McCray.
I need to clarify something. I think I understand the intent, but this is just a discussion. Am I correct? Yes. And it's not going to reopen the contract or anything like that? It's just a discussion? Okay, thank you.
Dr. Hawley.
I, too, am a staunch supporter of the union and the seniority-based process. However, I do hear and know of the problems that not being able to keep a teacher in the building that really is a service to children. Not to say that if that teacher got bumped out, I would not be able to get, or we would not be able to get another teacher to fill that position, because there are a lot of good teachers out there. But the one thing about Faison is that people actually applied and wanted to go to that school. They wanted to see the school flourish and do better. And not to say that in the past, people didn't want that to happen as well. But now you have teachers that are actually able to not write their curriculum. They're still using the district curriculum, but they're able to do some other kinds of activities that they were not privy to in the past. And I'm hoping that by having this amendment, this resolution, that we'll be able to take this not only to Faison, but to have a discussion at other schools that really need to have the support of a dedicated team of people who actually want to be in that tough environment. And it's a tough environment. I'm not going to say, that you know, it's going to be not your kumbaya kind of moment. It is really a tough environment, and people actually wanted to be there. So I was thinking about this long and hard once I saw this resolution come to me this morning when I read it. I will be supporting it. However, I want to be very clear that I do believe in seniority. I support seniority, but I also support the fact that people need to be in these difficult schools who really want to be there.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
I think that Dr. Hawley's last comment was actually the best to sum up the purpose of this resolution. It has nothing to do with others pushing for anything. Those who know me well enough know that I don't speak for anyone but myself. And while I have many people helping me, right and wrong are relatively clear in my mind. And the purpose is to get a dedicated team of people who choose to be in our tough places, and allow those teams to flourish and surround our kids with their expertise and skills and honestly love. So thank you again, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. Ms. Shealy, I wish you would have read some of the whereases, because I think the first one brings it all home. Whereas the district and the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers co-authored the Empowering Effective Teachers in the Pittsburgh Public Schools plans for submission to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for consideration of the Foundation's Intensive Partnership for Effective Teaching program. You know, that's a process where 100 districts began a process, and 4 ended up receiving them. There are now 3 in. It was unbelievable that, in the words of many people, whether it was the Aspen Institute or a number of educational journals, admiring the work of the school district and the Federation. And I think this is just an extra extension of that, asking the superintendent to continue to work with the Federation. Obviously today there is no institution, and we're seeing this with our neighbor school district in Philadelphia across the state. I don't think there's any other public institution in America other than public education that gets beaten up on a daily basis for all the wrong reasons. There are great things going on in our schools, and I think Phase On is one which is showing that we really can work together to better the situation for children. And I think the idea of putting children first is critical to everything we do. We should all be about student achievement, and I think this is a very, very good start to ask the superintendent to continue to work with the Federation to see what we can work out. So I thank you for bringing this before us, and I think it is very, very well written, and I hope everybody gets to see it, and I'm assuming the entire piece will be on the website this evening. Thank you, Ms. Shealy, for bringing it forward. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Brentley.
I just want to ask that it was mentioned that it was, I mean, like I said, I would support a discussion. Is there a possibility of just changing some of that wording, the last paragraph or the last sentence? Just, it's almost a directive. It says, for the teachers to reach an agreement on an approved teacher furlough process. And that suggests to me the only way that you can do that is reopening up a contract. And if it happens, it happens. But I mean, can we emphasize a discussion, you know, to getting together, but nothing to suggest that we are pressuring anyone to reconsider or pressuring anyone that all of a sudden these particular schools are failing and it's your fault, and if you don't change it, it is because of you. And so that disturbs me. So it's similar to what we've seen with the principal of Sean McNeely. You don't associate a change in someone's status and then present it, and then it looks like that he was responsible for the problem. So I am only suggesting as a friendly reminder that we emphasize just a discussion and just remove that section where it's almost a directive, where it tells them, you know, that in other words, by August 1, that they're going to come up with another way for the teachers to reach an agreement on an approved teacher furlough, which is a changed teacher furlough. And that is something you got to be concerned about. If they're our partners, we don't want anybody coming to the table with the weight of the failed schools on their shoulders when it's not necessarily their fault. And so to keep a good relationship, I think it's important that we even it and say, let's come together. Here is a series of things that we're concerned about. Can we talk about some things? And so it is a suggestion that I would be willing to support if we can remove that one section. Just say it's an open discussion. Ms.
Shilley, it's your resolution. Would you care to respond?
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. The directive in that second paragraph is to the superintendent, who I believe we have the authority to direct. And I think that it only states that she shall report to us in June of 2012, in June of this year. I don't think that it states that the union has to agree to anything. I'm just asking Dr. Lane I'm hoping that we will ask Dr. Lane to open the dialogue. And I completely agree with you. I'm only asking for a dialogue. It says, she shall update us on the ability for the district and the federation to reach an agreement by August 1st. So she will update us in June as to whether it is possible for an agreement to happen by August 1st to affect the 2012-2013 school year. And in no way, and I will say, I did talk with counsel regarding this resolution. State law is clear that furloughs and I guess are seniority based, except when the two parties agree otherwise. And so if the two parties were to agree to something other than a seniority basis for furloughing and bumping teachers, then that would be completely legal and well within our grounds. And so I'm only requesting that the conversations be had about the possibility of using some other basis. And I in no way am, and I hope I didn't imply, and I surely didn't intend to imply that failure of schools or any specific school would belong to one party. It would take, there are a lot of inputs that go into failure. And I would not blame anyone for any specific person for any of our past failings. I'm actually more hopeful that in the future, going forward, for our more vulnerable children, we can find new ways and better ways to provide them services.
Thank you, Ms. Shilley. Any other comments? Mr. Brentley.
Yeah, just my final comment, and I hope that we would continue on the trend of addressing issues of vulnerable children. As I mentioned before, the issues are large. If we were to change an agreement yesterday with the teachers, we still have huge, major issues facing us on those vulnerable children. So I just hope we don't stop and get off of this trend after this issue. And less than 3-4 months from now, when school starts again, we're going to have hundreds of kids up 5:15, 5:30 in downtown, traveling in areas that's dark and unprotected, which is different. And so there's a lot of issues with children. So I don't want us to, bypass that, and it's for the sake of doing something here. So, well, I offered something. I guess it's not going to change. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Brentley?
No.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
The new business item, the resolution is approved, and the resolution in its entirety will appear in the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Are there any other items to be brought before the board at this time that require board approval?
Are we going through,
Okay, now we'll go on to announcements. What?
are we going through the personnel, did we do all of our personnel items?
We did.
I missed it.
Okay. Mr. Brentley, I would like to get back to you, before we start announcements, I'd like to get back to you with your question about, I wrote myself a note. Oh, the policy dealing with athletics in schools.
Are you serious? This is 10 o'clock. I forgot it. That's why it was important to address the issue now. Thanks for the consent agenda.
I made a note.
10 o'clock. Thank you, guys.
Well,
Thank you.
Okay,
Consent agenda.
all right. Any other announcements? Mr. Brentley? Mrs. Khaleesi? Mrs. Fink? Dr. Hawley? Mr. Eisler?
I hate to do this, but I received an email this afternoon from Mike Walsh, who's the Deputy Secretary for the Administration of the Department of Education. I understand he was with Dr. Lane today at Phillips School. Phillips applied for national recognition through the recently launched Green Ribbon Schools program. I think was one of 4 in the Commonwealth that was selected. Did not win, but with the community created a mural that is on the side of the building. They have solar panels. He was incredibly impressed with the principal and the good work of the parents, students, teachers who worked on the application in good partnerships with Green Building Alliance and others within the community. It's great to be receiving good news from people in Harrisburg about some of the great things that are going on in Pittsburgh. So Dr. Lane, to you and your staff there, thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. Mr. McCrae? Mr. Sumter?
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. I want to mention this. A young man at Wow Elementary School won the Ben Carson Award, the scholarship, which is $1,000 a year for 4 years. He, I believe, is in the 4th grade. I don't have his name, but we can look it up. What I wanted to say was that in addition to receiving the scholarship, the Hill District Education Council gave him a laptop computer, brand new in the case. So he had that in addition to getting that award. I believe he competed with students in various grades, and he was the sole winner of that. So I'm sorry I don't have his name, but that'll be a research project folks can, board members can do as far as to look up, search up his name. But I just want to bring that to the public's attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. I would like to just remind anyone in our viewing audience, if you have a child in your life who will be 5 by September 30th, now is the time to register them for kindergarten. It's Ready Freddy time. So our new date is September 30th. Any child that will be 5 years old by then should register now. Are there any other items? Mr. Sumter.
Thanks to Dr. Crenshaw, his name was passed on to me. His name was Marcus Hall. Marcus Hall, the student at Aleo Wow that received the scholarship. Well, when you put out the call, folks respond, and that's how good we are here. Thanks a lot, Dr. Crenshaw, and the public is now made aware.
All right. There being no further motion. Khaleesi, Shealy, meeting, all those in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned. Okay, give us a minute. We'll start the Allegheny Intermediate Unit. You okay? No, I'm going home. Just go to the ladies' room? Okay. I'm going home. All right, I'd like to call the April 25th, 2012 meeting to order of the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit. Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call, please?
Brentley? Here.
Oh, I'm here.
Mrs. Fink?
I'm here too.
Dr. Hawley?
Here.
Mr. Eisler?
Present.
Mr. Gray?
Here.
Ms. Shealy? Here. Mr. Sumter? Present. Mrs. Azuda?
Present.
All members present.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Is it on the minutes? Okay. Will board members please turn to the minutes from last month? Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions?
Move to
Motion.
approve.
Eisler, Khaleesi. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, before we start the Committee on Education, Ms. Beer. Oh, okay. It's Committee on Business. Okay, you want to say something on the Committee of Education?
No, it's in the Committee on
Okay, are there any
minute,
comments
I'm
on
just
that?
not sure which-
Anything anyone want anything pulled on the Education Committee? All right, let's move on to the Business Committee. Ms. Beer. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Motion to approve?
This is a vote on the report on education. Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Ms. Scalise? Yes. Ms. Fink? Yes. Dr. Hawley? Yes. Mr. Eisler?
She's trying to be.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Report's approved.
All right, now, let's move on to the Committee on Business. Ms. Bear.
Thank you. If you look at the Committee on Business under General Authorization, which is Roman numeral 2, I'd like to pull the number C, which is on the back side. And I would also like to pull Roman numeral 3, which is the budget adoption in the attachment, the following page.
Are you pulling them for discussion, or are you pulling them for removal at this time?
Removal.
Okay. So, tell us again which ones?
Under General Authorization, it is letter C, which is in regard to the audit, and Roman numeral 3, the budget adoption and the attachment that's
Okay.
next to it.
So Roman numeral 2C has been removed from the package, and Roman numeral 3 has been removed totally. Okay. Mrs. Scalise, is there something you want to pull for discussion?
No, those were the two items that I did want to pull for discussion and then ask the board to pull them all together for this month's approval. I do want to state that the board had discussion of this at agenda review. The audit did not go through the audit committee nor through the business committee, and the budget didn't go through the business committee at all. We have requested that the budget be put on the agenda for the next subcommittee meeting. The audit, I'm not sure I understand the process. I'm hoping that Mr. Joseph will assist me. I believe the committee is already together, but I'm not sure. And I'm not sure how that process works, Madam Chair, so you're going to have to find out.
Okay.
Because from
Well,
what...
since it's been pulled, we have time to find out.
Well, you don't have much time is what I'm trying to tell you, because I have a email here from Mr. Burgee that's telling me that he's asked the Pennsylvania Department of Education how much time they have to put a budget through, and I was hoping that we could at least look at the audit before we approve the budget, and it's not giving us much time. I don't understand why we didn't do this earlier, but, you know, I don't, I can't answer to that. All I know is that, as the chair of this committee, I prefer that it goes through the process that we've established so that the board feels comfortable with whatever we bring forward.
So, Ms. Beer, you can be in communication with the committee and take it. Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, is there any other items anyone wants to pull for discussion? Okay, so, Mr. Weiss?
This is on the Committee on Business with the items pulled from consideration that were enumerated. Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Scalise?
To be clear, that means that the supplemental page is included in the pool. Thank you, yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley? Yes. Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Report's approved.
Okay, moving on to the financial statements. Any questions, comments? You got on this?
To adjourn.
Okay. Eisler, Fink, I think.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Thank you.